Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie and I am a dietitian slash personal trainer. Some of my favorite topics on my channel are mindful and intuitive eating. The reason for this is that I really encourage my clients to have a sense of independence and self-trust when it comes to having a healthy lifestyle. Even as a dietitian, I don't feel that prescribing someone a specific diet and then expecting them to stick to it is just the best way to go about it. I think that we all have different taste buds, we all have different food preferences, culture, families, experiences, friends, and we all just have different lifestyles. So the connecting factor for this is that intuitive eating really teaches us to listen to our hunger and fullness cues and not really restrict one food or another. We're just going with our hunger and fullness cues and eating when we're hungry, stopping when we're full, and eating the foods we love in moderation. We're not really being strict on any sort of diet plan. We're just going with what feels good to us, and in theory we would attain some form of healthy eating and healthy habits, but just use mindfulness in knowing that we can still have treats every so often. So essentially with intuitive eating, we will be eating healthy a majority of the time, but it's really not for the sake of a diet or for the sake of any sort of restricting. We're just eating what feels good to our bodies, what feels good to us, but then occasionally having treats mindfully and really embracing that and not judging ourselves for having that. So a lot of people ask me what are some resources for mindful and intuitive eating, because this is kind of a good topic to delve into yourself. It's okay for me to teach you some mindful eating, but I think just reading it and processing it yourself is good. And also one of these books is a workbook, which I really think would work the best for a newbie and for someone who's learning intuitive eating for the first time. Sometimes reading it doesn't give us the big picture. We really have to just write things out and process them ourselves. So without further ado, let's get into the books. And I have 4 books today, one of which is a workbook, and I think you'll really love that. I will save the best for last. So yeah, let's talk about the books I have today. So my first book is Eating Mindfully by Susan Albers. This book I picked up several years ago, read it while I was on vacation. This is a really good introductory book because you really don't have to read the whole thing front to back. You just kind of read through it chapter by chapter if you want, or even page by page. It really breaks down some intuitive eating and mindful eating practices and exercises. So I really like this one personally. The book is divided up into 5 parts: mindfulness of the mind, body, feelings and thoughts, and mindful eating motivations. So it has different checklists, mantras, and little tiny chapters that are really easy for someone who doesn't love reading. I definitely recommend this one if you are not a big reader, because again, you don't have to read it front to back, and it's just full of small bite-sized exercises that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing or reading. You can basically just choose one exercise for the day and then practice it throughout your meals. So that one, super simple, super easy, and good for beginners. So the next book I have is Mindless Eating by Brian Wangsink. I had to read this book in undergrad and it's a really interesting read. I'll just read a little blurb about it that I typed out. So Brian Wangsink is a professor and food psychologist at Cornell, and he writes about mindless eating topics such as why we eat more when we're dining with our friends, why larger plates and bowls make us eat more and eat more mindlessly, and how different things like the color of the room or the background music of an environment changes our eating habits. Very cool stuff. It's more kind of like it's a little bit sciencey, but not too much. It's more so focused on the research side. So he does go into a little bit of studies that he has done, and keep in mind that this is designed for dietetic students, or at least I was told to read this as a dietetic student. It's very interesting, and I don't think it'd be a very difficult read for anyone that's not a nutrition major. It's just one of those things, like, you might not dork out quite as much about the science as a dietetics major, so disclaimer there. But I do think that it's kind of cool to know how your environment can affect you. There are some things that we really understand well, like, you know, being around a social environment is something that's going to trigger you to eat more, but something as small as music or lighting or the size of our plate or the size of our bowl or eating while distracted, all of those things impact how we eat. And so if you want to kind of get into the why, then that would be a great book for you. The next book that I have for you guys is one that you might recognize because it is so well known, by Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribble. Hopefully I'm saying their names right. They are the bomb. They are actually the women who kind of invented or coined the term intuitive eating. I think that they're fantastic and amazing, and I look up to these women very, very much. This is a great book for someone who is really, really interested and invested in learning all about intuitive eating. If you get one book, I would definitely get this one or the next one that I'm going to talk about. This one is great because it gives you a really in-depth breakdown of intuitive eating. It's going to tell you step by step how to become an intuitive eater. It also goes into stories of people who became mindful eaters, became intuitive eaters, and that's really helpful to kind of understand that you're not alone in this. There are so many different stories that kind of touched me as I read it and that I resonated with, because as some of you might know, I've had a negative history with food in the past that I overcame. But one of the ways that I overcame that was learning to kind of eat intuitively, trust myself, not lug foods anymore, and recognize that I was never going to restrict myself on a certain food. I just had to eat the way that felt best for me. So that's why I'm such a big fan of intuitive eating, and eating in a way that's just realistic and non-judgmental. So many of the chapters include the 10 principles of intuitive eating, and I will read those off to you. First principle is rejecting the diet mentality, honoring your hunger, making peace with food, challenging the inner food police, feeling your fullness, discovering the satisfaction factor, coping with your emotions without using food, respecting your body, gentle exercise, and honoring your health with gentle nutrition. To talk about this book in depth, I would really have to break it down chapter by chapter, so let me know if that's something you're interested in. Again, I really love this book, so I would love to break it down for you if that's something that you want to see. My last and final book recommendation for you is, like I mentioned before, a workbook, and is actually by the same authors as Intuitive Eating. This is the Intuitive Eating Workbook. This has the 10 principles broken down into separate chapters like the original book, but it's all just kind of a workbook. So it has a little bit of a prelude to each chapter, a reintroduction of the topic, and then it has a bunch of activities that are awesome for learning more about your history of dieting and learning more about how that affects you. Do not judge me for the amount of sticky notes that I have in there to mark the pages that I'm working on, but I'm actually hopefully going to work on, you know, some top secret video for you guys in the future. So yeah. So this book has a great amount of exercises, and I'm actually not all the way through with it yet, but I'm trying to take my time and really dive deep into each chapter, because I think it's so valuable to constantly self-reflect and focus on how you can build a more positive relationship with food. I know that's basically what this whole channel is about. Okay, so wrapping up, if you are on a budget like myself and you only want to get one book, it depends on which book stands out to you the most. Like I said, the Eating Mindfully book is one for people who really don't love to read chapter by chapter or like read for a very long time. Eating Mindlessly by Brian Wensink is going to be for the research nerds out there. So if you love to know the why, I like to know the why of everything, and I'm not a research nerd, so I mean, whatever you prefer, then you'll love that book. And if you really want the most in-depth book on intuitive eating and you're new to it, then I would purchase the third book that I mentioned, the Intuitive Eating book. And then once you've read Intuitive Eating and you're like totes committed to the intuitive eating journey, then I would get the workbook after that. I talked a lot more than I thought I would in this video, so if it's super long, sorry. But I hope that gives you a little bit of an introduction to what type of books you can learn more about intuitive eating with. And yeah, until next time, I will see you guys later. Have an awesome day. Bye guys.